Most people don't realize they are not stuck because they lack talent, or because life is unfair, or because the world is against them. They stay average because of a lie they quietly accepted as truth. A lie so subtle that it doesn't feel like a belief, it feels like reality itself. It tells you, stay safe, stay liked, stay normal. It tells you, don't stand out too much, don't change too fast, don't risk being seen fully. And slowly, without noticing, you begin to live inside it. You start editing yourself in conversations. You start choosing approval over honesty. You start measuring your worth by reactions instead of truth. And one day, you wake up and realize something unsettling. You are not living your life. You are maintaining an image of a life that others can accept. That is the moment most people quietly surrender to mediocrity, not because they are incapable of greatness, but because they are addicted to acceptance. And the most dangerous part? They call it being normal. But normal is often just another word for socially approved self-abandonment. There is a point in life where a person must face a difficult question. Are you becoming yourself, or are you becoming what keeps you safe in the eyes of others? Because these two paths rarely lead to the same destination. One leads inward, toward depth, individuality, and psychological wholeness. The other leads outward, toward validation, comparison, and endless adjustment. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But becoming who you truly are requires something most people avoid at all costs. Disapproval. Misunderstanding. Even temporary isolation. And so they choose the easier path. They become understandable instead of authentic. And in doing so, they slowly erase the very force that could have made them extraordinary. Modern society does not call this a problem. In fact, it rewards it. Be agreeable. Be consistent. Be predictable. Be easy to digest. The system does not reject you for being average. It rewards you for it. Because average people are easy to manage, easy to replace, and easy to influence. But deep within every human being, there is something that resists this quiet domestication. A tension between who you are and who you were told to be. Friedrich Nietzsche captured this inner conflict when he wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But most people never define their why. They inherit it. From family expectations. From cultural scripts. From social media comparisons. And that is why they remain emotionally unanchored, floating through life reacting instead of creating. The lie of average living is not that you are not enough. It is that you must remain acceptable to belong. And so the personality becomes a negotiation. A constant editing process. A survival strategy disguised as identity. But beneath that strategy, something deeper waits. Jung called it the shadow. The rejected parts of yourself you were never taught to integrate. Your intensity. Your ambition. Your depth. Your anger. Your desire to be more than what is expected. And the more you suppress these parts, the more you feel a quiet emptiness that no external success can fill. Because you are not lacking achievement. You are lacking integration. Most people think growth is about adding more. More discipline. More habits. More productivity. But psychological growth is often about subtraction. Removing what is false. Removing what is borrowed. Removing what is performed. And what remains after the performance is stripped away, is identity. But to reach that point, you must pass through uncomfortable stages. The first stage is awareness. This is where the illusion begins to crack. You start noticing how often you say things just to be liked. How often you agree without thinking. How often you shrink your truth to avoid tension. At this stage, life feels slightly distorted. You are still inside the system, but you are beginning to see its walls. The second stage is discomfort. This is where awareness turns into emotional friction. You start feeling out of place in environments that once felt normal. Conversations feel shallow. Social approval feels less satisfying. Silence becomes more honest than speech. This is where many people retreat. Because discomfort feels like something is wrong. But in truth, discomfort is the beginning of psychological honesty. As Viktor Frankl wrote, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. But here, the challenge is not external, it is internal. Can you remain truthful when truth makes you temporarily misunderstood? Or will you return to the comfort of being liked? The third stage is separation. This is where your identity begins to reorganize itself. You stop performing automatic agreement. You stop over-explaining your presence. You stop seeking emotional permission to exist fully. And something subtle happens. Some people drift away. Not because you pushed them away. But because your presence is no longer built on mutual illusion. This stage feels like loss. But it is actually filtration. Life removing what cannot survive authenticity. There is a quiet night that many people in this stage experience. You sit alone, maybe scrolling through old messages, old versions of yourself. And you realize something strange. You were not disliked. You were simply invisible in your own authenticity. You were present, but not fully expressed. And that realization stings more than rejection ever could. Because rejection means you showed up. But invisibility means you were never fully there. The fourth stage is integration. This is where something shifts internally. You stop asking, how do I appear? And start asking, what is true for me? Your decisions become less reactive. Your speech becomes more deliberate. Your silence becomes more intentional. You begin to carry a different kind of presence, not loud, not performative, but grounded. Jung described this process when he said, I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. At this stage, you begin to understand something profound. Power is not dominance. Power is coherence. When your inner world and outer behavior are aligned, presence becomes undeniable. You no longer need to convince. You no longer need to chase. You simply exist in a way that is harder to ignore. And paradoxically, this is when things begin to shift externally. People respond differently. Not because you changed how you act. But because you stopped betraying yourself in small ways. There is a moment in almost every transformation that feels insignificant but changes everything. You are in a group conversation. Someone dismisses your opinion casually. And instead of laughing it off or over-explaining, you stay silent, not out of fear, but out of clarity. And in that silence, something internal settles. You realize you no longer need to fight for space that is already yours. Or another moment. You are walking alone at night. No distractions. No audience. And for the first time, you are not measuring yourself through anyone's eyes. You are simply existing. And it feels unfamiliar. But real. This is what most people never reach. Not because it is impossible. But because it requires them to stop outsourcing their identity. To stop asking the world who they are. And start listening inwardly. Because the deepest lie behind staying average is not that people are incapable of greatness. It is that greatness must be approved before it is expressed. But life does not reward approval. It responds to embodiment. When you embody who you are, instead of negotiating it, something fundamental changes. You stop leaking energy into perception management. You reclaim it for creation. And in that state, attraction is no longer something you pursue. It becomes a natural byproduct of psychological alignment. Not because you are trying to be seen. But because you are no longer hiding. At the deepest level, this is not about success. It is about wholeness. Jung once wrote, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. And that is the real journey. Not becoming perfect. Not becoming superior. But becoming integrated enough that you no longer abandon yourself to be acceptable. Because the cost of staying average is not lack of achievement. It is fragmentation. A life split between what you feel and what you show. Between what you are and what you perform. And over time, that split becomes exhaustion. But when the split closes, even partially, something remarkable happens. Life becomes simpler. Not easier, but clearer. You know what you stand for. You know what you will no longer participate in. You know what parts of you are no longer negotiable. And from that clarity, a different kind of life begins to form. Not one driven by comparison, but by direction. So if there is a final truth hidden inside all of this, it is simple. Most people do not stay average because they lack potential. They stay average because they agree, repeatedly and silently, to be less than what they already are. But the moment that agreement breaks, even quietly, even privately, life starts reorganizing itself around a different center. Not who the world told you to be, but who you stop abandoning when no one is watching. And in that space, you don't chase life anymore. You become someone life responds to.